What up, Pittsburgh Steelers fans? Matty P here with another episode from Steelers Touchdown Under. We are bringing to you the rookie review and preview ahead after week 3 and ahead of week 4. We're going to talk all things Steelers rookies, all things Houston Texans rookies as well, because you might be not as familiar with some of those guys. And they're having a lot of rookies step up. So let's crack straight into it with the Steelers rookies. I'm going to try and do this by pick, as those of you that follow our channel already know. And if you don't, hit the like button, hit the sub button. But we also count Calvin Austin in because it is his rookie year. Same thing on the Texans side, actually, because they've got John Mechie Jr. as well. We'll count both those guys in. But that leaves us with a good place to start. Calvin Austin with his best game in the black and gold to date against the Raiders. He had, maybe not his best game from a reception perspective, but he had 2 from 6 for 33.3% catch percentage, or he caught a third of his balls. He caught 6 out of 6 in week 1 for context, but he had his best in terms of he had his first touchdown. He had a 72-yard touchdown from Kenny Pickett, game-changing momentum swinger. That was huge. Gave him a yards per target of 12, even though he only caught 2 passes. Gave him an average of 36, so that's kind of cool for him. He's actually got an average on the season so far from his 9 receptions of 13.22 yards per reception and a 56.3% catch percentage. But really cool to see that from him. He had 73 snaps again in week 3 after 76 in week 2. Obviously, we know Deontay got hurt week 1. That's why we're seeing a bit more from him. But cool to see Calvin Austin really support the team as the receiver, as kind of the third depth receiver on the chart. So, yeah, cool to see Calvin Austin continue to be stepping up for the Steelers in what is his rookie year, but second season with the team. All right, let's go to Broderick Jones then. That makes sense. It's the first round draft pick. Again, we're not really seeing him start on the offensive line. He's only had 4 snaps on the offensive line so far to date on the season, 10 snaps on special teams for 12% of the special team snaps in the games he's been available, which is all 3. So that's cool from Broderick. A lot of people probably are wondering why he's not stepping up yet to the plate, or are probably sitting there going, when's this going to happen? I really do think we could see a change after the bye, or not too long after that. But let's see how the Steelers' offensive line continues to progress. While you have James Daniels out, he was ruled out of today's game. While he's been ruled out, you probably don't want to add a rookie into that lineup just yet. So makes a lot of sense while that sort of is occurring, that you keep it quite stable with some more experience there and not put any more pressure on Kenny Pickett. All right. Next person to talk about is our good mate, Nick Herbig. His brother, Nate, will make his Steelers debut today in the absence of James Daniels. He's on the season so far, 4 tackles, 2 solid, 2 assists, continuing to put a lot of pressure on. Really good 3rd and 4th depth chart piece for the Steelers at the outside linebacker position. And then special teams, he's played 77% of the special team snaps in the first 3 games so far. So that's 66 snaps versus just 46 on defense. I talked about rookie benchmarks going into the season, and I said if he could get 30-40%, that would be a really good mark. He's at 20% right now, but that's a good thing because it means TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith are healthy, and that's number 1 over the percentage of snaps that Nick Herbig gets in terms of our priority list. Next guy I want to talk about is Darnell Washington, the big 6'8", 6'7", 6'7", tight end out, 270 pounds to 290 pounds, depending on who you hear from, tight end out of Georgia. Played in 2 games. Played in all 3 games. Started 2 games so far on the season so far. He's played in 44% of all the snaps, offensive snaps available in games that he's been available for, all 3 as I mentioned, and he's played 30% of the special team snaps. So that's cool to see. What I'm not cool to see on the Darnell Washington front is, where is the receptions? Where is the targets? Maybe they're focusing on him just blocking first and foremost. We started to see Freemuth finally worked into the defense, and maybe now we're going to see the same thing. Freemuth worked into the offense over the last 2 weeks, and now maybe we're going to see the same thing happen with Darnell. One can only hope, because I think once you get him in, it's pretty crazy. I mean, hopefully some of you saw the photo with him standing next to Calvin Austin on the field. Look at the height difference. Look at the weapon difference. Look at the speed difference. That creates versatility for the Steelers offense, and that's something we want to see to put pressure on the defensive scheme of the opposition each week. Now let's roll into Joey Porter Jr. Obviously, we're seeing more and more from him. He's only allowed a 40% completion on the season in games he's played in, with 2 completions on 5 targets for 12.5 yards per completion. Allowed no TDs, allows a quarterback rating of only 56.2 when passes are thrown his way, yet to miss a tackle. That's a really, really good thing from a cornerback. While he hasn't played certainly stacks of snaps, he has 1 pass defense, 3 combined tackles on the season so far. And he's played 21% of the defensive snaps. So a bit more than Herbig there for a bit of context. And he's played 16% of special team snaps. I think you'll see him play a lot more this week, particularly when we talk about the versatility in the wide receivers on the Texans side, which we'll come up to pretty shortly. The final Steelers rookie to preview for this week, as mentioned before, we only preview guys that have played tangible amounts of the season, or really in 3 games in that have played at least 1 game this season. That's the same criteria I apply to the opposition team. But is Keanu Benton, who probably might most out of Wisconsin, who some Steelers fans were probably hoping we didn't need to see too much of, with Cam Hayward firing on all cylinders. But obviously Cam Hayward has the groin injury. Now Benton's been playing a lot more. He had his first sack against the Raiders, which was fantastic. He's got 6 tackles on the season so far, 1 tackle for a loss, 1 quarterback hit. So really cool to see that from him. Got really close, I think it was against the Browns, to his first sack, and then that didn't quite happen. He's played 34% of the defensive snaps so far, so the Steelers are definitely using him more in the interior defensive tackle or nose tackle position. That makes a lot of sense, but he does have outside pass rush as well, ability from the defensive end position, and you're going to see that more as the Steelers get Cam Hayward back and find a bit more depth in their team. I think they're also trying to limit what they're asking from him, which will help him play better and adjust to life in the NFL, and that's a really, really good thing. All right, so that's the Steelers rookies, how they're performing, and reviewing them based on their week 2 performance, looking at who's going to step up in week 3. Again, I think it's much of the same. Benton, JPJ, Calvin Austin. Hopefully we don't see too much Broderick Jones. Let's kind of keep him on ice a bit longer. The good ice, that's the champagne on ice, not the icing for the injuries. And Darnell, I'd just love to see him get a reception in there. And if Nick Herbig can continue to keep the pressure up when he's on the field, fantastic, and continue being a gun special teams player, that's really, really huge. All right, let's pivot to the Texans side of things. You're going to hear a lot in all the different analysis. You probably already heard a lot through the week if you're a diehard Steel fan around CJ Stroud. He has 7.5 yards per attempt average, 906 yards in the season so far for 4 TDs, no interceptions. So basically he's completed 64.5% of his passes. He's rushed 10 times for an average of 3.5 yards, total of 35 yards. He's been sacked 11 times. Jimmy G got sacked over 5 times in the last week's game, and Jimmy G didn't go into the game with any sacks. This could get a bit messy for CJ Stroud, particularly with Laramie Tunsil out, Josh Jones out, and Kenyon Green, I think, is out of this week's game as well, potentially, or he might be back for this week. That's Kenyon, not Kendrick. But Kenyon was out of Texas A&M, I recall, in the 2022 NFL draft. But let's get into Texans rookies. That's what I'm going to talk about. As I mentioned before, we just talked about CJ Stroud stats and the fact that Steelers need to put pressure on him. I'm liking the interior inside linebacker pressure we're putting up, so hopefully that can help against CJ Stroud. Let's move to the 3rd overall pick, Will Anderson, highlighted by Mike Tomlin and the Mike Tomlin Show on Steelers different channels. 1 sack on the season so far. He's a beast, according to Mike Tomlin. 1 tackle for a loss, 5 QB hits. He has missed 18.8% of his tackles, though, which is pretty high. But for context, Herbig's missed about like 28 or 30%. I can't remember which number it is. I remember seeing both those numbers quite close to each other. And he's had 6 pressures. Will Anderson will know that it's really important that he steps up to the plate this game, puts pressure on Kenny Pickett, tries to take advantage of an offensive line that's still kind of on their feet, that does have a replacement in the moving out of James Daniels because of injury. So look out for Will Anderson. He could have a very big game if the Steelers aren't on song from an offensive line position. Or perspective is probably a better word I should use. The next guy on the list is Alex Austin, who's a cornerback. He's only had 3 snaps, but they were all last week, so it's worth me mentioning that name if you see him, but I don't expect him to be a game changer for the Texans against the Steelers wide receivers. Speaking of wide receivers, let's talk about a couple of them from the Texans. Tank Dell, the story, Tank Dell, I think he's like 160 something pounds, early 170 pounds, 5 foot nothing. 2 TDs on the season so far, 71.4% catch percentage, 12 yards per target for 251 yards, and he's played 63% of the offensive snaps. So seeing a lot more ball probably than a lot of people might have predicted at the start of the season, but he did very well at Senior Bowl, did very well in the draft process, has so high reputation off that, and CJ Stroud is finding him already. So yeah, he's one the Steelers fans need to watch out for in today's game, but also the Steelers defensive scheme need to be aware of. He's their very own Calvin Austin, and actually right now he's got more yards and more TDs than Calvin Austin does anyway. The next guy on the list from a wide receiver perspective is Xavier Hutchinson, a guy I talked about quite a bit about on the channel going to the draft, or at least a couple of times. I definitely talked about him as part of my top 3 day 3 picks, even back end of day 2, but really I thought he was a nice solid day 3 pick. And he stayed on until pretty late. I think he was picked in the 6th round or something. So those that remember the live stream that we did that were back subs, then we did the 6-hour live stream on day 3 of the draft. You remember me talking about him a lot. Out of Purdue, wasn't used as much. He has 1 reception right now for 9 yards. So that's all I can say. But I expect them, number 19 for the Texans, Xavier Hutchinson, to do a bit more in this game and to be targeted a bit more, particularly because he's a bigger athlete. I think he's like 6'2 to 6'4, but definitely a bigger sort of wide receiver. The third wide receiver to mention is John Mechie Jr. Or I think it's Jr., but anyway, we'll call him John Mechie. 2022 draft pick that obviously, like Calvin Austin, missed out the year. He's had 3 out of 3 receptions on targets thrown his way for 30 yards. Now, that doesn't seem like a lot, average of 10, cool. But the thing is, he's had 2 first downs. So what that tells us is that CJ Stroud is going out there and finding John Mechie when he wants to actually, really push them up the field, get a first down. John Mechie is very good in the center of the field if you go back to his college tape, particularly just getting straight down the seam. So expect some of that in the game, in today's game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Next guy on the list to talk about is Dylan Horton, the 6'4", 275-pound defensive end. He has 1 quarterback hit and 1 pressure and has played 30% of the defensive snaps. So he's a name that you could see late in the half or late in the drive. They're in a long sustaining drive where the Steelers are running the football. That's when you might see Dylan Horton. So just wanted to give you the heads up on that name there. Last 3 guys on the list to talk about. It was a big rookie draft class. Actually, I thought Steelers fans, you might want to know that there was 16 rookies currently on the Texans squad, 5 of them on IR. As I said, I've only picked the guys that are playing so far, but there is still a lot of guys for me to try and get through. We're down to our last 3. One of them is Jarrett Patterson from out of Notre Dame, center. Didn't have as good last year at college, had a better year the year before with Sam Howell. I actually liked him for the Steelers between the 5th and the 7th round, particularly early, anytime in the 5th, particularly in the 6th. But anyway, the Texans got him. He's played 100% of the snaps so far on the season for only 1 penalty, starting at center. That's pretty good. We saw troubles of Kendrick Green when he did it for the Steelers. Jarrett Patterson is top quality. I had no doubts about his ability to transition in the NFL. It's actually something Daniel Jeremiah recently talked about too, and in his draft analysis. And so really good to see Jarrett Patterson make that sort of transition to the NFL. But hopefully people our guys like Benton, Liao can make the most of that and take advantage of him this week. Next guy to talk about is Ty Zenter, the punter. He is punted 11 times, 476 yards, a 54 long, and an average of 43.3 yards. So they do use a rookie punter, something to keep in mind of when the Steelers are looking to do punt block schemes. And the final play we're going to talk about from the Texans is Henry Toto, number 39, just to keep you on your toes. He had 1 pass defense, 20 tackles. But interestingly for me he has no tackles for a loss. That's something you want to see out of linebacker. That'll be something D'Amico Ryans is probably working with him on. He's blitzed only 6 times in 3 games for 3 and he also has 3 quarterback hurries, 3 pressures, but he has missed 20% of his tackles, and that's kind of not good enough at his position. So he's got a bit to work on. Maybe someone that the Steelers try and scheme for and expose, but he did play well at Alabama and he is adjusting. So just like any other rookie, week 4, 4th game for him to chance to get adjusted, make some plays, and make a name for himself. So really, ahead of tonight's game, or today's game, depending on which terminology you prefer, it's huge in terms of the Steelers rookies and what they can contribute. But equally, you're going to see that on the same side on the Houston side. Mike Tomlin kind of said that in his interview before, like on the Tomlin show, around that both teams being quite similar in where they're at. It's also why Mark and I talked about it on our show this week around it not being a trap game. But you know now that the Steelers rookies have said, I really look for big games out of Austin, JPJ, Benton. They're the ones that need to fire the most to help the Steelers. They're doing really well. It's just we need a big game from them, given the different guys that are out. And Calvin Austin's got a good yardstick to go up against in Tank Dell, and I'm looking forward to a battle of the pocket rockets, even on the score sheet. But as always, go Steelers.